All right, welcome back to another episode of Travel Ball Talk. I'm your host, Rich Prado, owner of Play in School. Today we're heading up to the St. Paul, Minnesota area to catch up with Mike Ponsolle from the Minnesota Postgrad. You know, you've listened to more than one or two of these conversations. You know I am super intrigued with postgrads. Personally, I think they're here to stay. Personally, I think COVID probably helped them, but I think they were coming along anyway. So I'm excited to learn about MPG as they go by sometimes. Mike, welcome to the show, man. How you doing?
Great, thanks for having me. Looking forward to this.
Yeah. Like I was telling you, I've had a bunch of post grad guys on this call, and I'm friends with a bunch of guys running post grads. So I've never been to Minnesota, so I want to learn a little bit about Minnesota baseball and find out what's going on up there in you guys call it the Twin Cities, I believe, Minneapolis, St. Paul. Why don't you sort of just give us your story? Tell us about your journey. You don't have to go all the way back to T-ball, but give us the quick bullet points, and then tell us where MPG came from, and catch us up to where we are today with them.
I'd be happy to. So just me and myself. So I started as a coach-wise. I started my first year at Friends University down in Wichita, Kansas. So as a player, I actually went to a junior college in Minnesota first, and then transferred down south to play, and finished at Friends University. It's an NAI in Wichita, Kansas. And when I was done there, I started my first year coaching as a grad assistant. After that, I actually got hired at Kansas Wesleyan University to coach there for about 3 years. With Coach Mark Carvalho hired me over there, and stayed there for a few years. And then family started getting a little bigger at home when my brothers and sisters were having a ton of kids and didn't want to be that Zoom uncle or who's that guy when he comes for holidays. So I kind of made a decision to go back home to Minnesota. And I coached at Roseville Area High School. It's one of the bigger high schools here, about 2,500 kids. Coached there for about 9 seasons before getting hired over here at MPG. So I'm now the current director, head baseball coach for MPG. I did not actually start the program. Nate Schleeman started the program, who I believe Nate's pretty good friends with a bunch of the guys that started those other postgrads down south. I know there's a contingency that's pretty close with those coaches over at Cisco College down there with TCS, and I know PGS had a kid that went to TCS as well. So it's kind of following over there, guys that started the program and kind of understood what it could do for kids. So I kind of jumped on board here, and I've been here ever since.
Yeah, I always try and give people an opportunity if we might drop some names and or we've referenced that I've talked to some other guys. Just you can scroll through all of my podcasts at playinschool.com/podcast. But if you want to jump straight to a pretty good conversation with one, arguably one of the grandpas of PG, that'd be with Logan Harrington out of TCS. That's in Texas. And playinschool.com/Harrington will take you to that episode. There was another pretty good call with Adam Aiken out of Combine Academy, which is in the Charlotte, North Carolina area, and that's playinschool.com/Aiken. And what I found out is there seems to be kind of like a little bit of a brotherhood. Do you remember? I don't know if anybody has ever heard of the PayPal Mafia before. The PayPal Mafia was basically when PayPal was founded. It was a bunch of these smart tech guys, right? Well, guess what? Yep. All those smart tech guys went on to create other big stuff, right? So it feels like there was this like PG Mafia, and then they've splintered off. One goes over here, starts their own. One goes over here. One is friends with this guy, and he goes and starts one. Just off the top of my head, I know there's another, like, what's it? Who's the post grad out in Blake Roulette out in Arizona?
PGS. Yeah.
PGS, and he was, he's got a connection with Combine, and it seems to be a pretty good trend where like, hey, man, spread your wings, go do your own thing now.
I think the thing is for those guys is usually, if you do it right, you always have the kid's best interest in heart. And when you see kind of the guys that are in that need, it shouldn't be, for lack of a better phrase, it shouldn't be a pissing contest, right? It should be a bunch of guys. If there's a lot of space for kids that want to get better, if you do it right, you kind of use each other to help kids out. That's the whole goal, right? We've had post grads have recruit kids just kind of have full places and tell them to give us a call, things like that, and we do the same. So it's one of those deals. If you do it right, there's a lot of space for kids that just want to get better, right?
I tell you what, I think take that sentiment and take it like zoom out just a little bit. If and this could apply in anybody who's maybe looking to make a job change or maybe a school change. We could be talking about a kid. You know what, man? If these people are actually your friends and if they actually love you and you have an opportunity to go do something, they're going to support you in that decision, right?
Absolutely.
And if they're
the right ones, well,
they might be sad that you're going to go leave and go do your own thing, but like at the end of the day, like if they're actually your friends and love you, they're gonna support you. They might want to compete against you and beat you when you're on the field, but they're not going to be mad at you. And I feel like
I think the biggest thing that we always hope or we look for with guys or coaches or players, whatever it comes down to, is that we just expect everyone to sell their own program, right? Just like any college. One of the biggest things we stay away from and what we don't do with even guys that we're recruiting, we hope others don't do it as well, but we don't even bring up the other places in the sense of what they offer or don't offer. That's up for them to do, right? So when we have our own recruiting, we just had a recruit call last night on Zoom, and he was asking questions and just talking about programs, and every answer we always give is something about our program. So if we have to answer a question about using another program in there, it's just not the right way to recruit and not the right way we go about it, so there's no need to do it.
That is such a great lesson. It's such a great lesson. You don't have to talk about the other guys. Just spin it and give the answer. I mean, this could be told. This is election season, and I've always said, I wish they were forced. I wish the people campaigning were forced, like it was a rule. Tell me what you're gonna do. Don't tell me about how bad the other guy is.
We always talk about it as a family. If you have to use the other one to see a reason why you're not voting for somebody, you're not really voting for the right reasons.
Interesting. You know what? This is such that's such a golden nugget. Hopefully people listen and hang in past the 7-minute mark that we're at now. But if they turn off the podcast now, hopefully they've gotten at least one really good piece of information. So I want to talk about MPG. And before we hit record, you're obviously, are you 1 hour back from the East Coast or 2 hours back?
Yep. Yeah, we're Central Time Zone.
You're 1 hour back. So we started the call 10 a.m. East Coast. So I was joking, hey, jumping on a 9 a.m. podcast is, not everybody jumps on 9 a.m. podcasts. And you're like, oh, we're already up and at 'em. We've already had team meetings with our sports scientist. All right.
Yeah, that's right.
And I was like, I don't know what that is. Tell us about, who is this guy and what does he do? Is he, how's he helping your guys?
Yeah, Nate's been an unbelievable person to have around, I'll tell you that. So Nate came from the University of Minnesota. He was over there working with, a lot of the sports teams, including hockey, swimming, other things around the whole area with one of their main guy over there, the director over there, Cam, is one of the best sports scientists in the country, and he's been able to learn from him. So before he got over here with us, he was actually, a lot of people don't know, we talked about with him a ton, but he was hired by the New York Mets to actually go with their big club and was ready to set to go, moved in an apartment, all the stuff down there, and right when he was about to leave, about 2 days before he was about to leave, they called him and said, hey, man, we got to have you hold on here because what happened, and that shut down everything. So 2 weeks turned into 2 years to longer, and they didn't have the program anymore. But he was fully hired, fully set to go with the New York Mets. And so before he came over here, because he was friends with our full-time strength coach that we also have over here, and they all both worked at the University of Minnesota together. So he came over, and it's been unbelievable having him. I couldn't be more surprised that he's still here. He's one of the smartest men I've ever been around in the world of sports science and the sports, just everything to do with strength conditioning, anything involved in that. And it's been pretty lucky to have him because and we didn't talk about it yet, but with our other academy that we have attached to it, so he's working with hundreds of athletes every single month, every single day, everything he's doing, trying to individualize programs. One of the biggest things we do here, so we try to stay away from having the same program for every same guy, right? So when you're recruiting, we have had guys, so our catchers has been one of the best things we've had over the years. We've had 3 D1 catchers that have come through the program. We're going to have another one this year, possibly a second. and we're going to probably have 4 to 5 D1 catchers in the 4 years we've been around. And just those guys as an example, right? We have 3 right now. They're all 3 different talent levels. So probably a D1, a D2, and a D3, trying to get them to a level that they want to play at and one that they're capable of playing at is our goal. So we try to do individual programs, not hold anyone back from the other and not move one too fast and vice versa. So we do that same thing with all of our athletes, the 26 guys we have here right now, that we kind of start by bucketing them together by strength and kind of move forward by your lifting age. And kind of lifting age meaning if just when you started lifting, right? If some guys only lifted for a year, some guys have been lifting since they were 14. It's just different what the knowledge of lifting and understanding strength. So we kind of move it off that way, but then we break it down to even individualize even more. So me and Nate were meeting this morning about every individual guy we have, of kind of where we should push them now that our games are going to be over. Tomorrow is our last doubleheader. And once that's over, now we're just strictly, developmental driven, right? So everything we do involved in that comes from our sports scientists, our hitting, and our pitching coach, and our strength team all together, just kind of putting our heads together saying, okay, what does this guy need to do to get to this level or where he wants to play, and individualize it completely. So one of the major positives that we have here is our full-time staff is here every day. So our sports scientist is here every day. Our strength coach is here every day, our pitching coach, our hitting coach, and just goes all across the board from there. So we got 8 full-time guys that are in these offices every morning with all these guys. And if ever Nate does some crazy things in the sense of if one day you're not feeling well, we changed our program based on just you being in a group, maybe you're recovering slower than you should be, or maybe you pitched a bunch the day before, maybe 4 innings or whatever it is, and we need to slow you down. We do a bunch of different testing every morning that Nate is able to see, like, well, your body's not recovering like it should. So instead of you lifting power with the rest of these guys today, you're going to do this recovery lift or vice versa. So it's pretty amazing to have that guy around to help with injury prevention, injury awareness, arm care after the fact, things like that.
I was about to ask you if sports scientist is just a 2022 fancy way of saying strength and conditioning, but then you made a distinction. You've got a strength guy,
yep,
and then
absolutely.
You've got a sports scientist, and these are separate
Completely.
roles.
Yep.
How do you distinguish between the two? Is this guy? He's got a bunch of tech gadgets and computers
Yep.
that he is
absolutely
sort of testing and assessing players.
4 different computers. He called it a science lab in the corner. Force plate testing to see what things that are putting pressure in the right spots whether you're pitching or hitting, or things that you can do properly. You'd be pretty amazed if you do this podcast live here. We'd be walking around there right now showing you all of it. I promise.
So he's not a traditional strength and conditioning guy, but he's kind of a he's sort of helping those guys tweak and fine tune what they're going to implement with these athletes.
Absolutely. So our strength coach writes all the programming for every guy. That's through MPG. Writes it all, does it all, tweaks it all. Nate will look at him like, man, it's just not working. That's not what we should do here because for this reason. Whenever we have injuries, we have guys that maybe go need to see a doctor or whatever it may be. He's the first one to step in and talk about it. So those 2 guys working together, we call them our strength team, and they do vastly different for sure. They come together, right, and have their same conversations because they're both smart guys. But when it comes down to actually going and implementing it, they're vastly different jobs. I promise you that.
That's really interesting. This is like new to me information, kind of. Maybe a bunch of other people are doing similar, but it's not something I'm sort of getting to see on a day-to-day basis. Hey, I always try and do this. I should try and do this at the beginning of the calls, not 13 minutes in. But Mike Ponsolle can be found over at MPG Baseball on Twitter, and as well as mpgbaseball.com over on the internet. You can catch up with him. That's how I caught up with him. And so go ahead. I feel like I cut you off. You were about to say something.
No, you're just talking about the differences, and our strength team works fully together with it. I think that's, like I said, the biggest positive within that is they're with these guys every single day, right? Well, it's not a couple days a week or 3 days a week, and we kind of adjust from there. We're so in tune with how they're feeling and what they're doing, and we do like every single morning. Just another thing that the sports scientist does. 100% of the mornings we're here. It's even on the weekends. These guys wake up, immediately go to their app and fill out a wellness questionnaire that says, like, from their words, how are they feeling, what are they doing, and we literally base things around that all day. Because, like I said, injury care, injury prevention is the number one thing we talk about over and over again here. Keeping guys on the field, getting them ready for baseball. But like, there's so much testing that he does that our strength coach doesn't have to do. There's certain jump tests, certain things that you can see that, hey, this guy's going to do well today or not do well today. There's just an example where we have a kid, I told you at the Great Lakes Baseball Academy portion, I know we'll get into that, but talk about, we have a kid there is going to Notre Dame, and that day he threw a bullpen that was 92, 93 one day when he was 17 last year, and the only reason we videoed him that day, because we weren't going to, he was just going to throw a bullpen. We videoed him because Nate did 3 different tests with him that before we did the lifts and the workouts, and he walked over and said, I'm not sure what your plan was today, but I bet you should get a camera on him because I bet you're going to see something special. And that was the day he had 90. That was the day he had 93, and he's never done it in his life.
Yeah.
So he went from 88, 89 to 92, 93 in a 3-month spurt because he's just been doing all this stuff with Nate and Landon and killing it. And then all of a sudden, Nate one day, just some one testing he did is like, man, you should put a video on this kid. He's going to do something different today.
Yeah. Hey, I don't want to take for granted. There might be a mom or dad who's tuned in right now for the very first time. And, I'm talking like I know exactly what postgrads are, but there might be a mom or dad who this might be the first time tuning into the podcast, and they're unfamiliar with like the category of post-grad baseball. Do you want to just give, I can do it, but why don't you give a 30-second sort of overview of the category of post-grad baseball, so that just in case, because I don't want to take that for granted.
Absolutely. No, yeah. So we call it this way. We call it, it's a college level program, meaning we do all the same stuff that you would at a college. Ours is minus the academic portion of it, but we get there. So we get there August 29th, and our last day is May 12th. And in that 9-month spurt, just like a full school year, we develop all fall, play scrimmage games against teams all over the country. Then we literally all spring would play a same season like a JUCO would play, but involved in that, we do everything we can to do development from the physical, the character, the mental, emotional, everything you could imagine in between. And really, you lose no eligibility being here, which is one of the biggest factors you can talk about just in sense, especially with what COVID has done. And we talked to a guy the other day that they said COVID is still going to affect what's the 2025-26 class. And we're talking with one of those Division I guys, and that's how far they see it going, especially with the transfer portal. So we're trying to give guys an option, an opportunity to, it doesn't really matter what the talent level is as a whole, because there's some very talented guys that come through this door, and every other post-grad they're throwing. Imagine everyone always hears post-grads, and you're like, man, he must not be very good. That couldn't be further from the truth. Yeah. There's guys throwing 90 all over the country that post-grads, and there's guys that have played some big-time places. And we always talk about it like this. It's a program where you can come. I'm not saying you won't go to a JUCO or you won't go to a 4-year, whatever you choose to want to do. We're a 4-year and try to help you. But there's a difference between coming here for a year, developing even just the emotional and physical, and maybe people aren't ready for a year, taking that gap year like we have can benefit you from maybe going to a place, and whether you go to a JUCO, whether it's in the Minnesota area like a DCTC, go to that area and go on the team, which is a great school, but you might not play right away, right? Because they have a ton of great athletes over there, great players, and he does an awesome job over there. Maybe you take that one gap year, still go back to that school, but now you're ready to play and you're ready to start and ready to get after it early, as opposed to kind of losing your way with school or with other things like that. And like I said, there's programs, the colleges all over the country that support that. We go play them all the time, and he's from IMG, so he understands it. And it's just a great program that can give kids confidence on the field and just literally in life when you're not ready to get out there yet.
That was a pretty good description. While I'm seeing at some guys who I know who are running postgrads around the country, we're seeing some bounce backs. So a kid who went to college and for some reason didn't work out or whatever, instead of transferring to another college and continuing to burn years, they're bouncing back and going to a postgrad. That's I would call that a minority right now. Most of the athletes going postgrad, these are kids who have just graduated from high school, and you mentioned a phrase. It's a great phrase. It's a gap year. I think most moms and dads will recognize that phrase, gap year. But so if a mom and dad is totally uninitiated and has never heard of this postgrad thing, think this is a gap year where they're going to get bigger, faster, stronger. They're going to hit the weights. They're going to play lots of games. But it's not.
And that's the point. I mean,
but it's not college.
Point, right?
But it's not. Yep, nope. It's not college, and we're not burning eligibility.
Correct. You just said that one of the biggest points that people love to talk about, we talk about, is that you're playing the games, right?
Right.
So trying to find a spot where you can actually play and do it is the number one thing we talk about, whether that's coming here to play because you might not get that opportunity. Even when we talk about our kids going out to other colleges, it's like we don't care about divisions, guys. going 1, 2, or 3 doesn't affect us. We're not trying to throw you on social media just to use you and do because you're playing Division One. We're trying to get you a place you want to play at, and the point is play. So if you have to go to a Division Two instead of a 1 or Division Three instead of a 2 or anywhere in between there, the best opportunity to get you on the field and playing is the number one goal at all times. And that's kind of where, if that doesn't come to you, this is one of those programs that gets you an opportunity to do that often.
So one of the things that's pretty interesting about these post grads, because a lot of our audience are going to be coaches just like you that are around the country. Yeah. It's, man, not only does it help the families, obviously, and it's helping the kids, but it's kind of a cool setup. You know, and I've talked to other coaches about this, and you know, you can describe your schedule, but you know, this is a business at the end of the day, because if you can't keep the lights on, you can't help these kids, you can't help the families,
sure.
Right? So there are, you know, if you're thinking about spinning one of these up where you live, go do it, but you got to think about your expenses, not just the revenue side of the equation, right? And one of the things that, you know, you and I have talked about a couple times is you're keeping your schedule within a reasonable driving range for the most part. And what that does is obviously it keeps your kids sleeping in their own beds as opposed to having to pay for a ton of nights at a hotel. The other thing that's really interesting for you guys is because another pretty big expense, if you're just a standalone, you're spinning up a post-grad program, well, you're gonna need somewhere to work out. You need somewhere to lift weights. You need somewhere to, you know, to play baseball. You're gonna need field. So all of a sudden you're going, yeah, I can get some good deals, but you guys have access to that stuff. So a lot of from the expense side, the renting a facility and having the strength and conditioning, you guys have some of that in-house. So talk about sort of like, you know, what y'all setup is. I know we've sort of alluded a little bit to Great Lakes Baseball Academy. So maybe you can talk about the relationship there and just talk about some of those like expense side of the ledger as far as like how you're able to, you know, what you guys have done to control that.
Yeah, so the biggest thing for us when we go forward with it, it's like if you're trying to start one of the hardest things to do is the expenses, right? You can't. I don't believe you can, and it's hard to do if someone does it more. I mean, awesome, more power to them. But you can't really expect to spend a lot of money early, and that's the sense of traveling. We didn't do that right away. We kind of built up to it, so we're traveling a lot right now. But we do, like me and you've talked about before, our fall, we stay within the 3 hour radius, we call it, and try to be as close to the Twin Cities as possible. Like you said, sleeping in their bed matters to us. With the sports scientists, we talk openly about how much sleep is more important for recovery than anything. So trying to get that kind of level back with our athletes so they can come back and train immediately is something we don't take for granted. So trying to get that aspect of it, financially speaking. But you got to work with organizations. If you're doing it right and you've been able to communicate a ton, we work with Ace Rental. We've been working our butts off for years with them, trying to build a relationship, and we have. So we try to find ways to help them out, to help us out, to push guys their way so we can help certain aspects of our program. But you said, I mean, we have Great Lakes Baseball Academy. Our owner owns that, and him and Nate Schleeman, who I talked about earlier, started Minnesota Post Grad. They do keep them separate, and it is a separate entity completely. But when it comes down to it, we have our full-time staff. There's other guys in the building that do Great Lakes stuff as well. But the beauty of our program, right, all these kids are in high school, so they're at school from 7 a.m. to 3 to 4 p.m., depending on when they start and they're done. Mm-hmm. But so from that 8 to 3 every day, 8 to 4, there is nothing going on in this building, so it's all post-grad all the time. We have full access to everything we need. I told you our strength team, our equipment, or our strength room, everything we have here. We can have 24 guys going at one time. We can have more going at one time, but 25 without a partner. So, I mean, you can have up to 50 athletes in that room at one time if you wanted to. That's how nice it is. You put a ton of money into it a year ago just to make sure we build the right portions of it, because strength is becoming the number one asset for kids to try to grow and get stronger. Obviously, is the most important part if you want to add to some of those numbers that coaches love talking about so much. So you kind of get in here, financially speaking, it runs off of each other in the sense of, like you said, there's no added cost in here of using it every single day. It's just that time it would have been anyway. So we're using it up and trying to do it well, trying to do it to the developmental portion, the standards that we look for. But like you said, I mean, that program has 25 teams in it. I mean, some of these guys have probably seen us around the country or playing in different tournaments with those guys, right? So I just talked to a couple of guys. I talked to the owner of Yardy Boys the other day. Is another academy down in Nebraska, and we have a relationship we're building with all those kind of academies over the area because they have guys just like anybody else, right? That need places to play and want to play in college. So building those relationships matter to keep one, the amount of athletes who come in through this door matters, like you said, because financially speaking, it does matter. But we put a lot of investment back into our athletes early and a lot of things that we call one-time costs, meaning if you're doing it right and not trying to worry about the money portion early, even if you do this without an academy, if you do it on just a separate entity by yourself trying to start the business of doing it, I suggest, one, you got to find the reasons you're doing it. You have to do it the right way. You have to do it for the right reasons. If you're going to do it just to get all these 90-mile-an-hour arms to feel good about coaching guys that are going to play pro or D1, then you're not doing it for the right reasons. I mean, there's kids that want your help just like anybody else. There's a lot of 70, 80-mile-an-hour arms that just want to develop and get better and play in college. So if you're doing it just to help the top 1% and leaving another 99% behind, your business will not be successful because kids can see through that, right? There's a lot of guys that want to work their butts off and do it for the right reasons in the right way and just be just like the guy throwing 90, but they just don't have the talent level they do. So if you treat them any differently, people can see through that and they don't want to be a part of it. And that's why the first 3 to 5 years, you got to reinvest back into the athlete for a lot of the equipment you might need, and whether it's blast motion like we give to every player, whether it's Rapsodos, whether it's a sports scientist that can develop the way it should be developed and actually do it for the kids' sake is something that we don't take for granted. So maybe down the line you're going to make some money on a business because it is a business and people understand that. But if you don't do what you're supposed to do early and kind of reinvest the first 5 years, you're just not going to be successful in that.
Yeah, so many in the baseball world, when you start talking about the business aspect of it, man, a lot of people get bent out of shape. And I'm like, well,
for sure,
if you can't keep the lights on, you can't help anybody.
Yeah, it's a fact that people, to be honest with you, probably, I don't want to say it harshly or bad, but you got to kind of get over that because in the sense of it, if you do it the right way, you can still have a business and help kids out and get people where they want to go. People do for the most part understand that. I think it's starting to get to me, from my thought process, I think it's starting to be less and less people that are like, man, you just want to take money from me and move on. Because people we talk to, because we're open about it. Like even when we do, like yesterday for our Zoom meeting with one of the recruits we got, we're open about the money immediately. We tell them about how much it costs. We tell them about what you're going to spend here or there. We tell them what we cover with all the trips. We tell them where everything is. Our apartments are 3 blocks. I'm looking at our apartments right now out of my office window. I mean, we're looking at all the stuff that we are fully open about. And if you're open about it, people understand it. There's no problem behind it. It's when you kind of want to talk about the costs at the end or don't talk about them at all or kind of say it's going to cost this, but now we need this later. Like we don't do any of that. We tell you what the cost is. If we add something later, it's on us. We make sure we're open about that immediately. So, because if cost is an issue, there's no problem with it. We'll just move on like anybody else, like they will, and we'll keep going on our way.
You just mentioned the apartments are literally within
Yep.
view of the facility. And that's another sort of consideration for mom and dad. Like your kid,
yep.
This is one of those spots where you can kind of get a test year. Like college is hard to get a test year. This is
Absolutely.
a test year where you can send your kid away. Listen, I just about failed all my classes freshman year. That is not a secret, man. So, like, maybe I would have been a kid who could have used that year to get adjusted to living away from home. Who knows? Like, but talk about the living situation, and I'm always kind of curious. Are there any commuters in your program that live right there in the Twin Cities area, or are all your guys living right there in the apartments as if it's like essentially dormitory living?
No, we got 3 guys. We got 3 commuters that come from the area, but even we have 7 Minnesota guys, I believe the number, and 4 of them do live in the apartments because they want that experience, right? Mm-hmm. That's part of what the parents have talked about. So our apartments, like I said, are 3 blocks away. I'm literally looking at them as I'm talking to you, and guys, some guys walk over if they want to. Some guys, we have half the guys drive every year. There's a ton of cars here. I think there's 13 different guys that drive in our 26. So you're looking at just jumping in, right? Hey, practice at 9. I'm leaving at 8:30. If you're not here, I'm leaving without you. Learn the life kind of stuff. And really drive guys over. But like you said, our apartments are one of the biggest things we do here in a good way, meaning we have 2-bedroom, 2-bathroom apartments that we work with, City Walk Apartments in Woodbury. We have a great relationship with them, talk to them all the time, communicate with them all the time with our guys. And they have 4 guys in each apartment, so we treat it just like you would a dorm room. We do that on purpose. 1, to make sure costs are low, and 2, to literally just get that feeling of having a roommate like you would in a dorm room, right? Mm-hmm. And I mean, to be clear, I call it a dorm room, but I've never lived in a dorm room that nice in my life. I'll tell you that. So these apartments are gorgeous in there. They have even all their extra spaces they get. There's a whole weight room in there too. They have golf simulators and pools, and these guys just love it over there. So it's a deal where they get there, they learn how to live with 3 other guys from literally all over the country, and it's so funny to see it because early they're like, oh, everyone's just trying to play nice, and not understand. Then all of a sudden in the middle, like, man, we're fighting, we're arguing. Like, yeah, that's how do we figure this out now? How do we communicate? How do we do this? And they're slowly figuring out how to live life without their parents behind them, just trying to, how do I communicate with a guy I don't agree with? How do I communicate with the fact that I'm from Washington, he's from Rhode Island? There's just different ways people live. We have a kid from northern Minnesota here that couldn't be more northern Minnesota, lives on a farm, just no technology at all, anything. We have guys from Atlanta, Georgia, where you just technology all the time, listen, and it's so funny to see those guys interact and just learn from each other, and it's been awesome. We treat it like a dorm room, right? We start going over there and actually check on them, communicate with them, talk to them, make sure they're staying out of trouble, making sure there's nothing in there that shouldn't be in there, and just continue the process to learn that, and so as they go forward. And that's the number one thing we get from parents. Number one, when we leave this place and we get emails from parents or calls from parents or recommendations or whatever it is they don't talk about the ability, they don't talk about the weight gain, they don't talk about the miles per hour gain. They literally use the word confidence. I'm telling you, 80% of the time we get something from somebody that the confidence they saw in their son from a simple 9-month program, that when now they're going to college, they couldn't be more confident sending their kid who lives above in Toronto, sending them to California to JUCO and Ventura College down there. Like, that kind of differentiating between areas where they're from is like, man, this is just the confidence they built from it has just been huge. So that's the number one comment we get.
That's a pretty cool competitive advantage as when you're going in, you're a freshman, you're standing next to a kid who's never done this before.
Absolutely.
Two questions I want to ask about to sort of piggyback on that competitive advantage is food. Like, that's a pretty important issue, topic to me. And then secondly, classes. I know a little bit about the sort of the setup, but let's talk about both those. I don't know what y'all set up with food is, and before I apply, I need to know, am I going to get, am I eating every day? Because that's important to me.
Yep. So one of the things that's not included with our cost is your overall food, the daily food that you have over there. Okay. So one of the things we do, I don't say combat that. So we do meal preps with guys. And food, all of the meals, we teach them how to meal prep, meaning we actually bring you to our Cub Foods, our grocery store, whether it's Cub Foods or Costco or wherever. And actually our first week, our strength team brought them in there and explained to them, hey, this is what you should be looking at. These are the aisles you should be looking at. Stay along the wall as opposed to going in the middle with all the chips and candy, and start understanding what buying food for cheap and in bulk will do for you. And these meal preps, like Landon, our strength coach, our first meal prep we had just the other day, he was able to teach guys how to make a week's worth of food for only $3.89 for the entire meal. So we try to show guys how to do that. And that's one of the biggest things that we love about it. Yeah, maybe we could filter it in the money, the food aspect. And we do pay for it. When we do meal preps, probably try to get once a month in here. We pay for all the food for every athlete and bulk groceries and try to give it to them so they can understand how to make it and what to do. We do a lot less do it for them or just give them food or things, and more teach how to do it, so guys can understand that. We don't have a nutritionist on staff. The next thing we should get next to our sports scientist. But when it comes down to it, we can give ideas, give things that we do as coaches and we did as athletes, and understanding what's in a grocery store and what's good to have and not have, and go from there. But all the food, anytime we take a trip, anytime, and whether that's the entire fall for our 20 games we play in the fall, whether that's all the trips we take down to Florida and Kansas and Texas and Michigan or wherever we go, we pay for the food on 100% of the trips we take. So anytime you're away from the apartments, we got you on food. We'll take care of that, so nobody's worried about packing something or traveling without understanding what you're going to eat or nervous about that. But we're talking the day-to-day when you're here with, weeks of no games or during the next 6 weeks before we go home for Christmas or 8 weeks, whatever it is, then they'll be on their own for food. But like I said, those are all the times we would take care of it on our end.
But, again, I kind of feel like that's like one of the kind of positive side effects of sending your kid out to a program like this is like, how many 18-year-olds have gone to the grocery store on their own? It's I can tell you, our guys alone, it was probably less than 40%. Oh, I was thinking less than 10%.
Yeah, it was way less. I just threw it. Yeah, I did not was a fixed stat. I just threw it. It was like there's not many.
Yeah, there's
guys
like
that have done
none.
that.
There's like no 18-year-olds who've had to shop for they've been in a
Yep.
grocery store and they may
For sure.
have actually bought something from a grocery store, but they put it in their mouths the second they pay for it, right? It's like a soda,
Absolutely.
candy,
Yep.
it's a
Yep.
protein, whatever. But to think about, oh, I got to go to the grocery store and figure out how I'm going to make 50 meals for
Absolutely.
for the next week, because part of the deal is these guys need to be putting calories in their mouths.
100%. 100%.
So again, just sort of like a positive side effect.
And it becomes that because you're looking at, so we had one kid 2 years ago that still blows my mind, but he came in at 127 pounds and he left at 162. And it's one of those, you're looking at a 35-pound weight gain in 9 months, and he absolutely killed it. I mean, he went to Target to shop every single Sunday. We look at things. He would come back if we had time, if we had breaks in there. We showed him different ways to do it. And you're talking a kid that he got here. He's like you said, he's one of the kids that never went to a grocery store, and he just really fell in love with the aspect of understanding what he's putting in his mouth, with knowing what's in there in a healthy way, and not just going to the Culver's and McDonald's and Chipotle's all the time, and understanding like, wait a minute, if I do this at this time with this amount of calories, I can gain this. Like, and he just blew up in a good way. And I think it's worth it more to have them learn that and do that than just saying, hey, okay, this meal's at 9, this meal's at noon, this meal's at 7.
Mm-hmm.
It's way more important to get them to understand how to do it, because our schedule changes all the time, right? There's things they need to adapt to. There's things in baseball like weather, and whether it's raining here, raining in Texas, raining in Florida, right? That we can't go up field and practice today, so we got to change and adjust. Well, I didn't get to go eat I didn't get to go eat for 45 minutes. I thought I was going to eat for because this changed, and then trying to understand what to bring to keep those calories going. It's pretty unbelievable by the end of it. These guys are pretty locked in.
Yeah. Now we've talked about, and anybody's heard previous discussions with post-grad guys, is there are no academics specifically as part of the post-grad program, but they can go and take classes somewhere. Are any of your guys taking classes, and sort of like what are the what's going on with that?
Yep. So about half the guys every year do about this year. I believe we have, I think exactly half that choose to go to college, and we make that choice. Like you just said, some guys, we don't make it mandatory in any way, because this is a decision you're making to do a gap year program, right? We could make it mandatory. We have relationships with Century Community College. That's credits are only like $180 a credit, which is dirt cheap for college. And we have those relationships in where we want guys that want to go over there, can go over there. But some guys literally have made that decision for 9 months. They're staying away from school. They're going to develop. They're going to get stronger, and they want to take a shot at baseball. So we don't make it mandatory in any way for them to do so. But we do understand what credits will do for you, right? So let's put it this way. There's about half of them guys are taking 1 to 2 credits per semester, meaning when they leave here, they have about 12 total. They have to be 11 credits or less. Otherwise, their eligibility starts, which would be the pointless compared to, trying to not lose that year.
Correct.
That's what reasons you have. But it's one of the biggest aspects for guys doing that. So one of the things we found, though, here's a stat that a lot of people don't know. One of our biggest, not I don't say people we work with, but in the sense of one of the biggest relationships we built for last couple of years, teams that we've had some good opportunities to send guys to some great places. But the Ivy Leagues, we were talking to guys in the Ivy League, from Princeton to Cornell to Harvard, all those places. And we've had guys go. We have 2 guys at Cornell right now, and their coach told us that they don't take junior college guys. Like the whole Ivy League doesn't do it from baseball. They have 20% of the athletes that go to the Ivy Leagues for baseball are from postgrads. So
interesting.
It's really interesting because it's hard to transfer from a junior college over to an Ivy League school. Mm-hmm. So they still take your high school credits, and you using your gap year as a time where you, like you said, you got developed from the maturity standpoint and are able to go there. So once they told us that, we started looking at education a little differently, in the sense of it is okay to have 9 months of not doing it, but we completely understand that the people that want to do it and get that understanding as well. So we combat that in different ways, though, right? So we say there's no education, but we do a lot of stuff during the weeks on our own end. So our owner actually does a book study on Tuesdays, tries to get them to read books on leadership and character development. Wednesdays, we have Culture Wednesdays, where Josh, our one of our assistant coaches, does, where we do like DISC, behavioral self-assessments, to try to understand, to learn your own situations and how you handle situations. We do things on stress and pressure, positive self-talk, grit, self-awareness. I mean, you're looking at all sorts of things that we just add throughout the whole year, that we continue to add throughout their entire development, meaning we make sure we take the time to do so, even if that takes away from fielding someone one day or hitting one day, where we do that. Like Thursdays alone, we do fill the gaps, we call it, where things that you don't learn in high school that you should learn before you go to college, whether it's how to do your own laundry, how to fix a flat tire, how to buy a car just in general, understanding your worth at a job when you have a job you want to apply for and actually go to the interview, like understanding what your worth is when they ask you how much do you want to make, like learning that kind of stuff, of writing thank you letters to family that help you along the way, writing resumes, it's just investing even into the market and just learning how to help save some money so when you get older you don't have to work till you're 65, 70 years old. Like we spend the time taking care of all of that so they are ready to go when they get there. Whether they took a class for actual credits or not doesn't really matter to us in the sense of what we want to teach them. So
that's pretty cool. Any parents who are still listening, if they missed it, the one of the key considerations, if your kid goes post-grad and they want to take some classes at the local JUCO or take some classes online, they can. That's a thumbs up. But you want to stay under full-time credits.
Yep.
Because if you're taking 12 credits, your clock starts, and that kind of defeats the purpose. Right.
Yep,
so that's the deal. That's why most kids are going to take 1 or 2 classes. So you're going to be at 3 to 6 credits each semester. So that's just one thing. He mentioned it, Mike. You mentioned it, but it, might have slipped past a parent or two. Those
for sure.
other things.
That's the sense of you're talking class wise. This is some of the stuff we do is based around what you will learn in the class, just so we can get that kind of understanding. Like when we do our Motivational Monday stuff, I don't do anything with the motivational part of it. Our athletes do. So like we have athletes make up a quote on their own. They can use other quotes for, just to help and just trying to give some motivation, but we have a make up one. So when it comes down to time to doing it, like they're the ones that actually will sit up in front of the team and do public speaking and actually learn how to talk in front of those guys and learn that kind of stuff. So we try to make it look and feel like what you would do in classes and try to get that kind of knowledge and understanding.
That list of things that, would you call it, the fill in the gaps?
Yeah, we call it it's a gap year, so we kind of use it we call it fill the gaps.
Why are we not learning those things in high school?
That's the question, right? That is the main one.
Listen, my parents spoke Spanish in the house, but having the average kid take 4 years of Spanish for him to know how to ask for a cerveza might not be the best use of our time.
Absolutely,
teach a kid how to change a tire. Teach a kid about compounding interest.
Absolutely.
My goodness.
Yeah, our owner, it's so funny because our owner loves that's one of his favorite topics he gets to talk about with the guys because it helps them now, right? Where we actually get, so if people can't afford our program, we completely understand it. But one of the things we do for the guys is because we have the academy, it's such a huge asset for us, meaning we have about 8 guys right now that actually help out with fall teams, like younger fall teams from 9 to 13. We have guys that give lessons for 9 to 13-year-olds during the winter. They're going to give even more. And Ryan, actually, our owner, pays them all to do all of this. They can take it off of what they owe us. They can take the money and do whatever they want with it. They can take them and buy groceries. They can, like a lot of parents will pay for the apartments and buy groceries while their kid works and pays out the program. Like there's many ways to do it, but he's really loves talking about like the investing portions. If you're making money with me, we can invest this now and it can help you buy a house in the future, help you buy a car. It can help you pay for college. So he's trying to really get these kids to understand something they should know that they can actually feel confident and comfortable doing. So
there's such a long list of things that, listen, whether it's 18 and you hit the real world or it's 21 or 22, you hit the real world and people just expect you to know how to do stuff.
Absolutely.
And it's like, no, a lot of these things were never shown to these kids, including myself. Like I love that idea, that fill, what you called it, fill in the gap.
Fill the gaps. Yep.
So smart and such a nice bonus. It's like a lot of the, y'all do a lot of baseball stuff, but there's also sounds like a lot of non-baseball stuff that is just as important, maybe more.
These guys, I'll tell you, it's more because these guys, they love baseball. Don't get me wrong, right? You have one beer if you didn't. But these guys, the amount of love they have for those things when we get ready for them, we actually do competitions with the meal prepping, like who does the best meal, right? Where all the coaches get to try them. Like these guys put more competitive edge into making a meal than anyone I've ever seen, right? Or when we do fill the gaps, like when guys are trying to learn, even when they're writing their Motivational Monday speeches, when they give it up in front, they don't let them just stand there, right? They kind of razz them a little bit, make sure they learn how to feel comfortable in environments where there's just their teammates, and kind of, it's one of those deals where you're gaining so much confidence from all the stuff that you thought in your back of your mind, you kind of thought, yeah, I know I can do that, right? Oh yeah, it can't be that hard to fix a tire, or it can't be that hard to do whatever. And then all of a sudden they get here and do it, and it's like, man, coach, I have no idea what I'm doing. That's okay. That's what we're here for. And let's figure it out now. So if you're stuck on the side of the road when you first year in college, you don't have to call mom or dad. You can literally change your tire and go fix it yourself. And that's kind of what we're trying to understand here.
This is just done nothing but reinforce my interest and my appreciation for the post grad opportunity. This has been a thing. I know you live in almost in Canada. You are in hockey country. This has been part of the hockey culture for a long
100%.
time, and it's newer on the baseball front. And pre-COVID, we were already seeing these opportunities, but I feel like COVID and the NCAA giving all these years back, it feels like it has sped up the growth of the post-grad opportunity, which in my opinion is a good thing. And I'm glad I had you on. It's done nothing but just reinforce, my appreciation for what you're doing up there, and more generally what this post grad thing is all about. Mike, do you have any sort of anything we missed, or any final words for your mom, my mom, whoever else, your wife might still be listening? Anything you want to give a shout out to, or any last words for moms, dads, coaches, or kids?
No, I appreciate you having me on. I just want to reiterate the fact, in the sense of, if you're going to do it, just do it for the right reasons. Just have an understanding of what you're trying to accomplish, right? If you do it for the business aspect first, it might not work out for you. It might, but if you do it for the right reasons and just have an understanding of what the backbone of what your business is going to be. From ours, it's grit. Grit is one of the biggest backbones we have, with the growth mindset in between. And if you do it for those right reasons and have been able to explain that to kids that want to come play for you and have their best interest at heart, you can be successful doing it without question. But if it comes down to money or a penny pension or things like that, it's going to be a tough spot to go for the next 5 years. So just find out what the reasons are, do them for the right reasons, and just stick to it.
The Minnesota Post Grad at MPG Baseball on Twitter, mpgbaseball.com over on the internet. Mike Ponsolle, this was fun, man. I want you to hang on 1 second. I'm going to end the recording, but I appreciate you coming on.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me.